is to put pressure on Hamas to agree to release the hostages that it's holding, of course.
But they agreed to release the hostages. If the ceasefire held, all they had to do was stop bombing. What are we talking about here?
As you were saying, the families of those hostages are extremely worried, many of them, about what this means for their loved ones. And we've had them staging rallies. There are other protests going on as well today against decisions being made by the Israeli government.
Yolande, as always, really good to get your analysis. Yolande Nell there joining us live from Jerusalem. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to talk to Oliver McTernan, who's the co-founder of the conflict resolution group Forward Thinking. And Oliver, I know that you are a former negotiator in the Middle East. Just talk us through what your understanding is of where we are with possible negotiations, because arguably, given the strength of those airstrikes that we've been seeing over the past few days, is any potential phase two of the negotiations, is that even feasible given what we're witnessing?
Karen, I think it depends entirely on one man, and that one man isn't Prime Minister Netanyahu, but it's Donald Trump. I think what I gather from conversations with my Israeli contacts is that the time...
I will say it's also Netanyahu too, but like...
timing of this renewal of the bombardment of Gaza is based on the need for Prime Minister Netanyahu to get through his budget before the end of March. If he fails to do that, then he is faced with the challenge of new elections, and many people predict he would not win those elections. So we saw at the beginning of this current ceasefire the security minister Ben-Gvir resigning because he had stopped the war effort, or the military effort rather. And now we see today he is reinstated as security minister. So it looks as if the timing in terms of his immediate objective, getting his budget through the Knesset, and the coalition government surviving, it seems that has worked. But I come back to it. I think the only person now who can get us back on track is Trump to intervene, as he did, we were told, before his inauguration.
So given that Trump, at the moment, his focus is on Ukraine and those conversations, we heard so much yesterday, that telephone call with Vladimir Putin, is his eye off the ball? And that potentially is also why Benjamin Netanyahu is taking advantage of that. And I appreciate you referenced that the budget is coming up within the Israeli parliament. But given that President Trump is preoccupied, is that beneficial to Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, the argument I hear is that Trump and Netanyahu are of one mind, that both believe that the way to end the Gaza situation, and in particular to get the hostages returned to their families, is through military pressure. Now, if that is true, I think it is highly mistaken, because in this context, in my experience, actually threats and military action stiffen resistance. They don't bring about the results that are desired.
I think legislation that was proposed in Israel by a coalition that's supporting Netanyahu making it illegal to talk about Jesus. I did not see that now. I wonder what all the U.S. Christian nationalists would think about after support they're giving to genocide under Israel's right to defend itself. I think the politicians won't care. I think the populace will. Legitimately. But I don't think that like Marco Rubio is going to be like, oh, now we can't support Israel anymore. Or like Lindsey Graham are like, oh, now we can't support Israel anymore. I think the U.S. populace would be like, see that as a betrayal. But like politicians are going to be like, but they're still our allies, you know? Oh, I figured it out for my thing. Okay, sorry.
Well, I think that we're in a complete unknown future at the moment.
Oliver, we're seeing the strength of feeling from the families of the hostages, and we're seeing people out on the streets.
I mean, like, I think that you have to understand who like the average like Israeli supporter, evangelist is like in America is like they genuinely believe that like they are like religiously involved with the state of Israel existing, right? And so they think that Israelis are their allies because of the fact that like like Israel's the promised land and it belongs to the Jews and like they deserve to have that land by divine right. Right. But if they realize that like, oh, the Israelis are not playing ball and they say you can't talk about Jesus, they're like, well, I like Jesus. Right. I can see that becoming a point of contention for a lot of like Christian evangelicals, not the politicians who have a, political or military agenda behind the existence and establishment of the state of Israel. For the people who are like ideologically or religiously involved with the state, I can see that becoming a point of contention.
Of Israel, they're on their way, they're protesting, they're on their way moving to Jerusalem. Does that have any, in your opinion, inkling? Does that sway Benjamin Netanyahu in any way?
Again, from conversations with Israeli friends and from visiting Jerusalem a number of times and being in the Knesset, my opinion is that it doesn't, in fact, that he's driven at the moment by the desire to survive politically, because the consequences of losing the premiership, remember, he's facing a serious court case. I think that perhaps is limiting his vision. And what is in the best interest of the country, I think internally and within the region, isn't always being served by this. What worries me too is that what we're witnessing is a total disregard for the Fourth Geneva Convention. In international law, Gaza is still an occupied territory, and that convention obliges the occupier, which is Israel, to protect the lives of citizens, their dignity, to ensure food, water, and medicine is available. Well, we've seen all of this sort of disregarded and no real response globally. So I fear what we're witnessing now just isn't impacting on the...
They also corrected earlier, he corrected from saying like the war to Israel's military campaign, which he's not calling it a genocide, but like still better than calling it like a war, and the and acting as though it's two-sided. So I think there's a genuine shift in rhetoric, especially after the election, where like it's now more even like not even just in America, but like obviously globally, to be aligned with Palestinians as opposed to Israel, because Trump is seen as the big bad internationally as well, right? Like people are more likely to be on your side once they realize that Hitler's on the other side, even if like they were doing the same thing.
The lives of the Israelis, the hostages, their families, and the 2.3 million people in Gaza. But it's having consequences for all of us. And we don't seem to be aware of that. Without a rule-based international order, I think we are going into very, very dangerous waters.
Oliver, it's a grim note on which to leave this conversation, but we are out of time. Oliver McTurnan, co-founder of the Conflict Resolution Group, forward-thinking, former negotiator in the Middle East. Thank you very much for your analysis and expertise. Much more, of course, here on BBC News.
I want to talk about Chuck Schumer a little bit, because apparently there's a lot that he said over the past day and a half.
The last time I had you on Friday was on the day of,
like he's literally going on a media tour to defend his decision to like just to throw the country towards the Republicans. Let's see Chuck Schumer on CBS.
Anti-Semitism we're experiencing right now in America began after the worst instance of violence committed against Jewish people since the Holocaust.
Back in 2023, New York Senator Chuck Schumer made a passionate and personal speech from the Senate floor condemning.
Oh, also, I just want to point out the fact that where's it at? I'll show you guys a second.
Anti-Semitism, and that is the topic of his new book called Anti-Semitism in America, A Warning. In it, he writes, the rise of anti-Semitism is a, quote, five-alarm fire that threatens American democracy. And Senator Schumer joins us now. Senator, thank you very much for being here.
Great to be with you all.
Wouldn't want to be looking out your window when I woke up this morning, right? You've got protesters out there. It's been a difficult few days. We're going to get to that. We're also going to get to the book. But I want to talk about what's going on in the Middle East, because overnight, the ceasefire that had held and that you had celebrated between Israel and Hamas has been broken.
Right.
Your reaction to that, and do you think a ceasefire could get back on the table?
Yes.
Could it be reestablished?
They were really close. And this ceasefire, the second round of the ceasefire is important because first it says Hamas, which I believe has been a large cause of the trouble.
With what evidence? Do you think that they're going to demonstrate this with any evidence at all? No, he's not. Probably, most likely.
Would disarm, and Israel would remove its soldiers from Gaza. So they were close.
Oh yeah, Hamas just needs to lie down and take it, and then hope that Israel removes its soldiers from Gaza. Yeah, thank you. Even though that was not in the ceasefire agreement. Yeah. Hamas just needs to disarm based upon nothing. And then Israel, based upon nothing, will remove its soldiers from Gaza. Yeah, sure. Even though they are violating the ceasefire agreement. Yes, I did see this.
It fell apart. I don't know the exact details. It happened overnight, but
Then why are you talking about it? It's your job to know the exact details. I love how he's like, Hamas is a big part of the trouble. I know that for sure, but I don't know the exact details about why it fell apart this time. I don't really know. I don't really know. It's interesting. It's weird. It's weird.
I think our government has to work really hard to bring them back to the table and get those hostages home. And I think it's possible because they were close at one point.
Now, last week, you and 9 other Democrats helped avert a government shutdown by voting for a Republican-written bill, which many Democrats have been angered by, and we've seen it described as a civil war, as a train wreck. Many Democrats believe, you know, if you have a government shutdown, that will force President Trump and Republicans to the negotiating table. Why not use your vote to push back and fight?
Because the idea that they would go to the negotiating table is they don't do it. This is a new group. This is not the old group. Let me explain.
So, why are you here in the first place? Genuinely. Why are you here in the first place? Why are you in politics? If you believe the Republicans cannot be negotiated with, number one, why was your entire strategy as the Democratic Party negotiating with Republicans not near 6 months ago? Don't think I forgot about that. Don't think I forgot about that. Why was your entire strategy Republican outreach 6 months ago? Number one. Number two, I don't care if you think that they're non-negotiable. It doesn't matter to me. You put the government shutdown in their hands and you make them make a decision. If they can't meet, it's what I said it last week, chat. This is what I said last week. I said, if the Democrats have anything less than 50 seats in the vice presidency, Republicans own the government. Somehow Republicans with 48, 45 seats in the Senate can pass legislation or they can hold up the government. But if the Democrats have 49 seats, they can't do anything. Even if the Republicans don't have a super majority, they can't do anything, right? They have to vote alongside the Republicans because, we have to. We have to give Republicans exactly what they want. Like,
when I took this vote, there'd be a lot of protests, but I felt I had to do it for the future, not only of the Democratic Party, but the country. Because as bad as that CR bill was, and it was bad, a shutdown is 10 times worse. Let me give you what happens.
Been blamed on the Democrats.
And you're right, Gail. But can I just explain
But
what?
you had been saying you were not going to vote. I think people were upset with you, and people are very upset with you because you had led people to believe that, no, I'm going to vote against.
Okay, well, let me explain why first.
Wait, he voted for the bill as well as for cloture? Because isn't cloture a way for them to vote like no on the bill, but it still goes through? Right, they can do like a symbolic no vote on the CR itself, but like the bill still goes through anyway. So he voted yes for the bill? Why would you do that? So he didn't even do the meaningless protest. He not only voted for cloture to force the bill through in the first place, but he also voted for the bill. I think he's pro the bill, honestly. No matter what Chuck Schumer says, hot take. It kind of feels like to me that he is pro the CR and everything in it because he voted for it. That's crazy.
The shutdown is terrible. People ought to know.
That, no, I'm going to vote against.
Okay, well, let me explain why first the shutdown is terrible. People ought to know that. The executive branch, in this case, Musk, Doge, and this horrible guy Vogt, who have no concern for working people, would have had sole power to determine what opens and what closes. They determine what is essential. You can't go to court. So on day 2, get rid of SNAP and food for hungry kids. It's not essential. Day 4, get rid of mass transit aid. Let New York.
Even if what he's talking about is correct, that is temporary, by the way. Those are temporary measures. Temporary measures during the government shutdown by dictating what is essential, right, to be funded during the shutdown and what is not essential to be funded for the shutdown, right? And so Chuck Schumer traded a temporary pause, because that's what it is, a pause on like Medicare and SNAP with a permanent removal of funding for Medicare and SNAP. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you pass the CR, which is doing the same thing, but is permanent? The CR is saying what can and cannot be funded by the government, by like the Trump administration, through the legal proceedings. Instead of a permanent pause that is unconstitutional, that will be, right, or can be, you know, at least fought back against. Like, and it would make the Republicans look bad. If the government shut down and the executive branch was like, okay, well, we decide that SNAP is not essential and Medicare is not essential and Medicaid is not essential and the funding of the Department of Education is not essential, and like they decide all of these things, right? The VA is unessential, are unessential. Guess what's going to happen to the people who are Republicans who are on SNAP? Their payments are going to stop and they're going to be mad. They're going to swipe that card and it's going to decline. Guess what's going to happen to the Republicans who are on Medicare? They're going to try to go to the hospital, to the doctor, and they're going to get a bill. And they're like, I shouldn't get a bill. But they're like, hey, your Medicare fell through. And then they're going to be mad. They're going to be mad, right? They're going to have to pay for their own prescription drugs. And they're going to be mad, right? Financial aid falls through and they're going to be mad. They're going to have to pay for their kids to actually go to school. And then they're going to look at the people in power and they're going to say, listen, you better work with those Democrats to give me my benefits back, right? My Social Security. You better go to the table and work with them. And they're going to be mad and they're going to protest, and then Trump's going to lose favor, and it's going to make the entire Republican administration look weak. Then you can swoop in as a Democrat and save the day. The Republicans understand this because they do it every freaking year.
Tuesday, March 11th, a little bit less than 3.5 days away from government shutdown. And the state of play at this point is that Republicans are looking to take a vote today, essentially, to pass a continuing resolution. The continuing resolution is going to essentially extend, or presumably extend, the last year's budget for another 6 months, at which time the Republicans will try and pass their big reconciliation bill that cuts Medicaid by hundreds of billions of dollars, that cuts SNAP by hundreds of billions of dollars. That really takes a wrecking ball to our government. This continuing resolution also increases defense spending and cuts other areas. And those cuts in other areas, and we should also add, it also funds places that Elon Musk has already essentially shut down. Mm-hmm. They are supposedly shutting down, I don't know, like 5,000 programs at USAID, yet USAID will get the same amount of funding. So there's going to be this big slush fund that Trump will have, presumably, if this passes. Also, if there is nothing in this budget, this continuing resolution, that says Congress has the ability to appropriate and Elon Musk is going to stop doing what he's doing, then there is no mechanism in which to stop Elon Musk short of the courts, but the courts have already tried to stop him. It is basically Congress would be acquiescing to what is unconstitutional in terms of what the balance of powers. It is unconstitutional, as according to the Supreme Court in Train v. New York City in 1974. And it is illegal relative to the Empowerment Control Act of 1974. So it is imperative that Democrats attempt to stop this bill. In the House, they have no ability to stop it. And it appears that all the Democrats are going to vote against it. And Republicans, they can afford to lose, I think it's 1 or 2 votes.
Well, there are 2 holdouts, and it was an interesting quote, or maybe not quote, but recounting in Politico this morning in the newsletter. They said Trump and White House officials have been telling GOP holdouts who want more spending cuts that the administration will pursue impoundment. That is